Welcome back. I'm Tedward, and welcome to beautiful Northern California, where I have the pleasure of driving Honda's first mass-produced electric vehicle. This is the Honda Prologue, and let's just get the elephant in the room out of the way first. Yes, this is built on the GM Ultium platform. This shares the same platform as the Chevy Blazer EV, but Honda has taken that platform in order to expedite their EV entry into the world and built upon it for their own. So this looks a lot different. It should drive a bit different because Honda has done their own suspension tuning. They've put a lot of work into making sure this car is unique and not simply some badge engineered job. And I know that a lot of people love to just tear down a badge engineered car because look, the Supra came out and all we did was take pictures of BMW emblems all over the car. But me and Charlie of Daily Motor, and today an associate of the Topher, are going to take this out and see how it operates and behaves. But let's just get a few things out of the way first. This is the Elite trim. This is the top tier. It is all-wheel drive. You can get this as a front-wheel drive vehicle, and if that doesn't suit you, you can wait for the Acura version of this, the ZDX, which will be an all-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive trim. Now, Honda's going to tell you this has about 300-mile range, and in front-wheel drive trim, it does, 296 miles to be exact, but in Elite trim, this only has 273 miles. Does that matter to you? It's not a huge difference, but it might. The front-wheel drive version is going to be 212 horsepower with 236 pound-feet of torque, while this all-wheel drive Elite trim has 288 horsepower and 333 pound-feet of torque. So that's a substantial difference in power delivery, and it doesn't seem like a huge hit in the range for that power. But you are going to pay for it. This one, after destination, is over $59,000. So you're not getting a cheap EV from Honda. And in two-wheel drive trim, you're still going to be paying $48,795 after destination. It's about a $1,300 destination fee. Is that going to be enough to justify electric vehicles to those who maybe were buying Accords and things of that nature? I'm not so sure yet, but we will find out in the near future. Gluing us to the road is a 21-inch wheel wrapped in a 275 section front and rear tire. We don't know the weight of this vehicle just yet, but we do know that it's about 5,000 pounds. So it does justify that width. And in terms of style, I do think this Honda Prologue looks the part. It doesn't have some wild, flashy EV vibe. It's low, it's wide, it's about the length of a Passport. So you're gonna get the usability of a normal type of SUV with the perks of an EV if that's what you'd like. From the front of this, man, oh man, this thing is genuinely a wide vehicle. And in Sonic Gray, it looks fantastic. Lots of glass, good visibility. We're looking forward to that. What I like about this is they didn't also go crazy with annoying things. It has normal door handles. In fact, even the charge port isn't some mechanical slidey door that's going to get screwed up in the winter when it ices over. You just pop it open like a normal gas door. Inside, this is where these cars are actually really good even in the standard and lower trim levels because you still get the 10-way power adjustable seats. You get heated seats. You get things in the standard car that honestly, it's hard to justify all the extra money for the Elite trim unless you need certain things. This has the gorgeous brown interior, and I think it just kind of makes for a lovely contrast to what might otherwise feel like a little bit of a Spartan car. There's not a ton of stuff in here. It's open, and having a little bit of contrast takes away from just feeling like you're in a sea of black plastic. Around back, you'll notice there's no Honda badge. It actually says Honda, so that's unique to the Prologue. And let's take a look back here. With the Elite, I think you do get the ability to kick and have a no-touch power liftgate, but that's nice. And let's see what we have for storage space, because look at that. Reasonable depth down here. You've probably got some fun charging goodies in that bag. And these fold down as a 60/40. So there's going to be lots of room for you back here to play around and use this space. There is no real room up front for the frunk. So let me show you that anyway, just so you get an idea of what's going on under the hood. Pull twice. And this always feels like a little bit of a miss for a car without an engine, where the packaging of certain EVs does call for stuff to be up front. We've got motors, we've got accessories. We do need this space to be utilized for mechanical stuff. And now having a frunk would be nice, having that little bit of extra, smuggler's box up front, always cool, but I understand. I mean, Genesis is doing the same thing, but the difference between, say, a Genesis EV and this is a ground up EV. And from a ground up EV, it's definitely a little bit unique to not have any space up front. Keep in mind while you're looking around here, this is a pre-production vehicle. So I know Charlie's pulling at wires and looking at tape and stuff like that. Not everything is exactly as it will be in production, but what we're gonna get out of this today is a reasonably true driving experience to what you're gonna see on the market very shortly. Since this is our first look at this vehicle at all, let's take a look at the rear passenger space. We have all of our junk back here, but room for people, nice flat floor back here because, no need for any drive shafts coming through. Tons of legroom. This is a pretty comfortable place to be. You have USB-C charge ports down here. HVAC controls in the center console for the rear passengers. We like that because that's a huge complaint in, say, the Honda Civic. They don't have that. And a nice vast panoramic moonroof, which is giving me loads of light, and I do have a sunshade that can properly go over there, so we're not just relying on the tint to keep us cool. And up front we get a pretty decent and ergonomic style of touch points. Now what you'll notice up here is a lot of GM stuff. This is where the GM switchgear starts to come into play because these are all GM buttons here, these are GM screens, this is a GM steering wheel with a Honda badge on it. In our center console, we've got big cavernous space. This is a familiar key fob to anyone with a Chevy truck. And you also have your Honda key card, which this is available so you can kind of swipe or just kind of hold it up to the door handle, and this will allow you to get into the car, similar to what we've seen in Tesla. So let's start it up and get it on the road. Our push to start button down here, foot on the brake. And there we go. Can already hear the comments about the door chimes and their familiarity with another brand. So get this seatbelt on, we'll jump out, pick up Charlie, and get on our way. I'll pull back and down to get into drive. .333 pound-feet of torque, doing us some good. This isn't bad. This is actually reasonable power. I was kind of expecting to be underwhelmed because in typical Honda fashion, power isn't the crux of their brand. They usually look for suspension refinement and ergonomic driver interfaces. And that always puts them a step a little bit behind the competition when it comes to power. We look at Accord, CR-V, there's other options out there for those segments where you can get more power, and those numbers typically draw sales into the competition, whereas those who just really enjoy the driving experience of a Honda, like myself, will fall into those cars despite being maybe a little underpowered. Pilot, for example. This actually has enough. Now, the weird thing about the EV realm is just the fact that power has gone crazy in EVs. So you get into a Tesla Model 3 Performance or something and you step on it, your passenger, in my case Charlie, might be vomiting at this point, or at least scared that I'm about to do something really stupid. This is not that. This is not going to push you back into your seat to a point where you're going to be afraid of the car, or you're afraid to give your child this car, your darling 16, 17, 18-year-old kid with very little driver experience. And I guess our automatic wipers are on, courtesy of our GM switchgear. But this car, you could certainly hand the keys over to anybody knowing that they're not going to put it into a wall at 120 miles an hour. At highway speeds, 64, 65 miles an hour, this is really planted and solid feeling. So that does give me a little bit of that Honda vibe, because that is something that you do get in a Honda. Road noise, relatively low. I've got a Tesla behind me. I wonder if we can get him to pass us just so we have the comparison. But this is like a normal size type of vehicle. It's low, it's wide. I have lots of cargo space. There's room between me and Charlie. We're not touching knees. We're just hanging out. And this center console, pretty reasonable, but the fact that this is a, underneath pass-through, which we'd see in GM products, definitely gives you the vibe that, that's not what I wanted. I want to turn this off. There we go. Okay, wipers off. Gives me a little bit of space to work with down here for, let's say, a road trip. The other thing, you're going to notice this steering wheel is going to look familiar and unfamiliar. Familiar to you if you're in the GM world, because this is the same type of steering wheel buttons and interface that you would get on, say, a Chevy Colorado or a GMC Canyon. The difference is that we've got a Honda badge on here. So we do just look around the cabin and start finding the items that are GM, which isn't so bad, because if I'm being honest, having some of this GM switchgear, this is stuff that I actually like in GMs. I like that I have heated and cooled seats with independent buttons. There's actually buttons for everything. This is unfortunately a GM sort of infotainment setup, which isn't to say that I dislike the GM stuff. It's just that I really like the Honda stuff. Accord is so good. Is it the worst thing in the world? No, it's gonna do the job. I don't mind these interfaces, they work well. Honda's moving to Google stuff anyway, so it's not like it's a huge departure from what they're doing in Accord, but their stuff is just sleeker. This feels a little iPad tacked on, and I've never been a huge fan of the Chevy center dash, because it's just a little boring. It's not the best looking UI. It gives you all the information you need, but again, Honda's stuff does look better. In the future, we're going to be getting full Honda EVs. There will be full Honda EVs that are going to be kind of ground up Honda things. This partnership, I think, is already sort of dissolved at this point with GM, so we can look forward to that. But I do understand that Honda was looking to get into the EV game and they needed to move fast, so this is the compromise. It's working with a partner and then using this platform to design their chassis and suspension and interior space around the limitations of the platform that they are borrowing. One thing that I'm missing out of this Prologue is that I do miss my Honda controls on the steering wheel. I own a Honda Civic Type R. I like interacting with Honda's nomenclature and their design language. This is a Chevrolet steering wheel, so like my right hand should be playing with my set and increase decrease on my cruise control, yet now I have to do it with my left. So even if you own Hondas in your family, if you're a brand loyalist, you are gonna have to adapt to a different style, even if you have all of the same generation of everything, which is a little interesting. Let's talk about ride quality and suspension. So Honda has made a point in saying that they have tuned this specifically to feel like a Honda, and in some ways I agree. I do think that there's a reasonable level of stiffness and compliance. I think it's a little stiff like a Honda, because it's got to have that sporty, engaging feel, but you also don't want it to be crashy over bumps. I think it leans a little bit on the crashy side on some unpleasant roads, but in a corner, it loads up okay. It actually, you get that little bit of body roll and it settles, and that's all right. That feels Honda to me. The thing that doesn't necessarily feel Honda to me is the steering feel, and I just want more texture. I just want a little more road feel from the car through my fingertips. The seats are reasonably comfortable. There's a little bit of lateral support, not a lot. It's not going to be a sports car, so I still move around a little bit, but there's a nice shallow type of shoulder on this, which makes ingress and egress really easy to get in and out of the car, but it's not necessarily going to pin you in place when you've settled this into a corner. But the lumbar support is lovely. The seat bottom is all right. I can see myself spending some time in this. I'd love to take one on like a really long road trip just to understand how that's going to behave and how it's going to do with my back, which is not the best on a long road trip. Let's do a quick 0 to 60 in sport mode. I'd love to see a Cayenne towing. Yes. So let's talk about charge speeds. This is capable of 150 kilowatts, which means that it is behind some of its competition. I think some Hyundais, the Ioniq 5 is around 300 kilowatts. That can charge much faster. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do that all the time, because just because Electrify America or whoever the heck you're charging with says that they can achieve those charge speeds doesn't mean that every station is actually going to be able to do that. 150 kilowatts is formidable and appropriate for where we're at right now. For example, the Chevy Bolt, which I drove on a long road trip, was kind of a pain because that's only a 55 kilowatt charge speed. That is kind of brutal. So this is still going to be a fast enough charge speed to not be feeling like you're sitting around all day, but you're not getting top tier blasting all the juice into this thing. But Honda is really dedicated to trying to take away any worries that you may have about charging the vehicle. In fact, they even have their own little app that is supposedly able to direct you to and pay for across a vast array of different charging types. So EVgo, Electrify America, even Tesla, you'll be able to use that singular app and go in and charge your vehicle, which I think is wonderful. I'm sure there's other brands who have some sort of solutions, but from what I've seen, Honda, I think, is partnered with more of them than anybody else. So I do think they're really committed to making sure that if they're going to send their customers down this battery electric vehicle route, that they're not going to be left stranded. They're not putting the cart before the horse when it comes to this, because I think a lot of other brands were really dead set on just getting the vehicles out there and not necessarily thinking about the customer experience when it came to actually getting juice in the car. Whereas Honda, I think, really made sure that if they're going to send their customers out and into the world to utilize these vehicles, they wanted them to feel very confident and comfortable that they can get power when they need to and where they need to without fumbling with 5 different apps and hoping that something's going to take their credit card, or if they're in a weird spot with their phone, it just works or doesn't work. Hopefully that works. We'll be able to test that in the future. One pedal driving makes life pretty simple. It's self-explanatory, but we also still have this little guy back here, our paddle, which is going to help us initiate regen if we A, have one pedal driving off, or B, if we just want a little extra boost. I found that to be very helpful in the Bolt when I drove it. This feels much more substantial than a Chevy Bolt, I'll tell you that much. The steering is light. There's some feedback. I don't feel a lot of texture or information coming through the steering wheel. So I don't know that this is going to be our canyon carving back road EV, which, I mean, there's not really many doing that to begin with, but I don't know. That's where there's a slight lack of Honda-ness to me in the steering, because I'm used to a Honda steering setup. We will absolutely heed the warning. Despite the fact that there's trees growing on these tracks, I think we're safe, that there's definitely nobody out there that is going to hit us with a train. So some points in favor of the new Honda Prologue. I think it's a really practical vehicle. You've got tons of space, there's ample legroom, it's a comfortable place for 4 people for sure to sit and go on a drive. You can get your family around, you can fill it with stuff. Points against it: it's kind of expensive. This is $60,000 essentially out the door, but remember, you will likely be able to qualify for a $7,500 tax rebate, so that will get cheaper. It's just, do you want to do that, or do you want to get yourself the Honda Passport or Pilot? Because now we're starting to talk about similar money. So if it's got to be an EV, then I get it. Some points against it: while I definitely did a pretty good job getting a more Honda style suspension tune, it still feels pretty big. This is not a light vehicle. And when we put it into some corners, not that you're going to be out carving canyons in your Prologue, very likely, but it hops a little over some bumps. It can get a little bit floaty, not in a dangerous way, but just in a way that's just noticeable enough that the ride quality does not feel like I've just gotten out of a Civic Si and I'm getting a comparable EV experience. Not to say that's what they were going for, but if we're just playing the game of saying, does it feel like a Honda? I don't think you would jump out of a Civic or an Accord, jump into this and feel the immediate DNA. You'd have to look for it a little bit. I do think while it's a very easy car to drive, the steering could have a little more engagement and tactility. It's weighted, and that's what's giving you the feedback. So when you turn, you're getting steering weight to tell you what's going on, not necessarily any texture from the road to give you that information. I do think the one-pedal driving is tuned really nicely. If you're going to be a hyper miler in your EV, this is going to be a welcomed vehicle to do it in. It doesn't throw you forward into the windshield when you're on normal mode with the one-pedal driving, so it's a pretty easy thing to modulate. This is a problem I've had with other EVs. Tesla, I'm looking at you. When you get to that like top of the pedal, sometimes it really feels like you're standing on the brakes. This doesn't do that, and I really appreciate that. I think as people come from internal combustion engine cars into electric vehicles, this is probably the easiest transition. The visibility out of this Prologue is phenomenal. This is something that I think is a big safety issue in today's vehicles because they can actually tell what's going on. Now, you're still going to really want to utilize that rear, the camera, especially for like the rear when you're in reverse, because it's a pretty small space out of the back, but that's typical of most cars today. Nothing to be shocked about, but I get decent visibility out of the side and rear quarters, and that's what I want when I'm on the highway, when I'm pulling out of unfamiliar territory, when I'm in the rain. That's stuff that I like. If you are a diehard Honda person and you are looking forward to this feeling and being and mimicking the Hondas that you either currently own or would own, that's where this may fall short a little bit, because you've got the GM switchgear. It's switchgear that I like, but if Honda is your bread and butter, if Honda is your life, this is the first Honda I think I've ever seen with OnStar. That's something that you just don't normally see. Everything is functional. Everything works well. The difference is just that if your spouse drives an Accord with the new Google setup and you're really into that layout, this is going to be a little bit different. This is still an Android setup. It's still familiar, but it isn't going to be mindless when you go to hit the button. You still have to think a little bit if you're going from Honda to this. That's all. I think that to get Honda into the EV game, this Prologue makes so much sense. It needed to happen. Honda skipped plug-in hybrids. I would love a plug-in hybrid Accord. I would love a plug-in hybrid CR-V. I think those would be really smart vehicles. It's okay though, because they're going straight into BEV and they want to get these battery cars out there. They're investing massive amounts of money into their own EV development, their own factories. The Marysville factory, I think, is going to be a battery factory. This is just the tip. This is just the tip of the iceberg of what we're going to see from Honda's electrics, and I think it's really a smart move on their part as well, because it's giving them a really sure-footed place to start and adjust. They're going to be able to take what they learned from this Prologue and inject it into the next generation of battery electric vehicles that they're going to be coming out with in rapid succession. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm glad Honda's making this. I think people are going to enjoy driving this. I think it makes a lot of sense for a lot of people who just need a family car that can haul other things, that has the right shape, the size. I mean, this is vast. This is a really well put together interior in terms of the size. It has no business being and feeling as big as it is, because it just doesn't look that large from the outside. So we have to applaud Honda for giving us a vehicle that kind of punches above its weight as far as cargo space. Maybe in the future we get a frunk. Maybe in the future we get all of the Honda ergonomics that we know and love. But for now, this is okay. That's going to do it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one.